And I've realized we have several great men here at our church and some older women who have a lot to offer us about what you do when you go through life and you learn what is important and what isn't important. And to sit with these people here at our church when we have coffee after liturgy, I've come to know and love several of our elders. Vasilius, Theo, my own father, they're men who have shared so many stories about what they learned maybe from their parents or what life has taught them, whether it was in war or just going through the Depression or hard times. And to sit and listen to the wisdom of these people has brought me such joy to know that it's not about, do we earn a good paycheck? Do people like us? It's about love and what we've learned in how we relate to people. And if we've come through struggles, hard times, we're together and we can learn the joy of just hearing what life has been like in the good old days and pass that on to our kids so that this rope in life can keep growing and we can learn to smile, be happy, not let life defeat us. And I'm so thrilled that I've gotten to know some of the elders here at our church. I've learned about Greece, I've learned about wars, I've learned about family, and it's something you can't learn anywhere else, not in a book. So while we have our elders with us, it's time to sit down and say, hey, what do you want to tell me today?
Well, I'll tell you a little story. You know what the All-American, not the Heisman Trophy is in football? Do you know what the Heisman Trophy is in football, George? Well, that's the best player of the year. He's the best. In the 30s, we didn't have the Heisman Trophy, but we had the All-American. In other words, the best player of the year was All-American. They had pictures of him in the newspaper and all that. So there was a fellow, his name was Jay Berwanger. And he went to the Chicago University in Chicago. And they elected him as the All-American of that year. Maybe it was 36 or 37, it was early 30s. And they had a picture of him in the newspaper, a big picture of him, holding the football and running down the yard. You know how they play football? I don't know if you know about football. A little bit. Anyway, they named him the All-American of that year. So we had a Chicago boy, went to Chicago University, who was the All-American of that year. So they honored him. So I got this picture in the paper, and I was so fascinated by it, it was in color, that I took a piece of paper, and I took a ruler, and I made lines in the paper, 1-inch squares. Then I took a paper, and I put the same size, I framed it out the same size, and I made 1-inch squares. So I sat down with a pencil now, and I put the eye here, the nose there, the ear, the hair, and the football, the helmet, whatever he was doing, you know. I recopied that whole thing. And that started me on art, especially with a pencil. I said, my gosh, this is a good thing to do. So I began painting pencil works. And I wish I had that drawing, but I lost it someplace down the line, see? That was my first art pencil that I've done. But I decided that at that point, I'm going to start doing art. I don't care what it is, I'm going to do art. I'm just so fascinated. So you think now, I've been painting since the early 30s, 35, 36, 37, whatever year. I was still going to school. I graduated in 38, high school. So I went to work. I worked for my brother, and he had a grocery store. I worked for my brother, and then I was painting all the time. When I was in the Army, I went to all the states you could imagine, traveling. In every state, I always drew something out of that state. Whether it was a person, or a landscape, or a river, or a waterfall, or whatever, I made sure I wanted to draw. Make someone happy, make someone happy, and it goes on and on. So I took that as my theme song, and I used it as part of my growing up. I made a picture, I gave it away. I just wanted to make somebody happy. In 1942, 41, 42, the war started. we were playing basketball at a place called Hull House in Chicago. That's a very famous place. They had a basketball court there. And it came over the radio that Pearl Harbor was bombed at, attacked. So everybody stopped playing basketball and wanted to listen to the radio. That's all we had was radio. We didn't have too many TVs or anything. So I said, well, gee, I think I'm primed to go to the service. I have to go to the service. So in '42, I went to the service, and they put me in the Air Corps. And so they sent me to school, and I learned all about airplanes, and I learned all about radios and radar and stuff like that, because they needed people to work on that for the people that were in the Army. So I worked in a fighter squadron. A fighter squadron is these small planes that go out and fight other airplanes in the war. So they had radar. So we learned about radar in the school. And so I was in the Army in 1942. I went in, and I was there until 1946. So now we were shipped, after we left the United States, we were shipped to the South Pacific. And we landed in Hawaii. We had a base there. And we were supposed to fly, our squadron was supposed to go to Iwo Jima. Now, you've heard of Iwo Jima. If you haven't, it's a very famous place where they did a lot of fighting. And we were supposed to go to Iwo Jima. So that meant that the airplanes would take off and go out to another island and land, and then we would come with a boat, and we'd have everybody in there, and then we'd put them on the boat, and we'd go further in so we could battle the Japanese. We had church services on Sunday, and we used to go to church, and whether your denomination was Catholic or Protestant or whatever, Greek Orthodox, you went to a church anyway, and you prayed. You sat there and you said, please, Lord, keep me alive. I want to get back to my family. And in my case, I want to draw. I want to get back to America. I want to make some more drawings, and the more drawings I make, the more I can give away to make someone happy. And that's my theory in life, and it still is. See? So that's the way you fight your worries in the Army. You just think about what you're going to do when you get back home. This one girl was a very good dancer, and she was Albanian, actually. Nice tall girl. She was very nice, good friend of mine. I knew her for years. She says to me, Plato, I want you to meet a girl. She says, so he introduced me to Lillian. And she says, now Lillian's a good dancer, but she needs a little training, or something. So I want you to dance with her and be nice and everything else. Just take it easy and all that stuff. So I said, okay. So I danced with Lillian. We had a few dances, then I met her next Sunday, and I met her the next Sunday, and I met her the next Sunday, and I would tell we have dinner. Next thing you know, we got married. And that's what made my life increased to a value where it was a nice life, dancing, I had a nice wife, I had 4 children, and everything went fine, And I moved to Fort Myers. Fort Myers was the best move I ever made in my life, other than business. Because in Fort Myers, I found the people and the church that I really love, and I really love being there. And so I donated all my energy and everything to our church in Fort Myers. And I've been here since 2000 in Fort Myers. The first thing I did, I went to the Greek church, and then there happened to be the festival coming up in February, because I moved in January. So a festival came up, so I helped at the festival. I began serving tables and cleaning and doing everything that I can at the festival. It was just part of my upbringing. That's the way I had to do it. I had to help everybody. So I helped the church. I helped working at the festival, and then I made drawings, and we sold them at the church so they make money so they could continue on with their business. And here I am now. It's 2013, and I'm still working at the church, and I'm still doing that. It's my life. That's what I love. I want to give something away. Well, the best moment of my life was this. I love the church, and I love to draw, and I love to give something away, make someone happy again. That's my theory in life. That's it. So I began doing that. And I found out that the more I do that, the happier I am, the happier the people are, because they're getting a present, see? I'm not giving them money or anything like that. I'm giving them something that they could cherish the rest of their life. And that's the way to continue. And that's the happiest time of my life, is working at the church and working, painting like crazy all the time, and giving a person a drawing that they can have for a lifetime. And there's nothing happier than making someone happy and doing that. That's all I can say about that.
All right.
In order to live a long life, you have to set your goals on something that will give you pleasure. My pleasure was, I danced all my life. Since the 30s I was dancing. So that kept my health going. I danced a lot. And I cherish that. And I say to everybody that, they say, tell me, what's your longevity? What makes you so good at your age? I says, dancing. I danced all my life, and that's part of it. I worked all my life, and that's the other part. And I didn't care how many hours I put in, I was happy to do it, because that's life. You got to do it. And if you don't do it being happy, then there's something wrong with you. You got to be happy. You got to do what you like. And tell people that to go to church and be honest. Very, very important to be honest. Don't talk to anybody about negative things. Always positive. And you've got to do that in your life, because if you do it, somebody else will get it. And if you know somebody else got that, that makes you happy too, because you've done something in the world. That's good. And that's all. I said, don't do anything negative. I mean, don't rob, don't cheat, don't do anything. Do everything right, and you'll be a happier person.
My mother and my father came from the island of Mytilene in Greece. My father was here in 1919, and he came as a tailor. And then he went back and married my mother and brought my mother here. He became a citizen first, and then he went back and he brought my mother over here, and they lived in Rahway and Metuchen, New Jersey. It was very, very simple. Very simple. My mother and my father were working. I was taking care of my sister. We didn't do anything. We played jacks, hide and seek. We didn't have, all the things that they have today. I don't even remember having a radio until we moved to Vermont. And television didn't come until many, many years later. In fact, I was in New York City, and we were in Grand Central Station, and they had all the television stations up that they were just opening up. And we couldn't believe it. I mean, to me, it was something phenomenal. And after a few years, when it was, became available, we got one, but I was married by then. And that was, because I've been married 67 years. I used to like Flash Gordon in the funny papers. And I used to say, I'll never see these things. But I did. I saw Sputnik go up. I saw it all. I had taken a business course. I was not in the sciences. That never interested me, but it did interest me in the business end of it. My dad was really pushing me towards that too, and I was really more interested in that. And where we lived, it was a small town, and nobody had science there. I heard it on the radio, and I took my sister's bicycle, and I rushed downtown to my dad's shop, and I told my father that war had broken out. And I can't remember what he did, but I know that he was upset, very upset, because they had family in Europe. And he and his brothers actually, during the war, would buy all these when they were able to buy all these surpluses and ship them over to their town so that the people could have clothes to wear, food to eat. And that was after the war, though. They couldn't do it during the war. And I married Peter Capitan, who was from Middletown, Connecticut. And we lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved to Bennington. We had a little restaurant there that we worked together. It was like going to a party every day. I mean, when we got too busy, the customers helped out. I mean, that's all. I mean, it's still a small town. I mean, when we got there, it was 14,000 people. It's still 14,000 people. They die, they get born. I mean, it hasn't really grown.
Nobody moves in.
And I got involved in the school district because my daughter was going to school. By then, I had a little girl. We didn't have a church over there, and I was a very good Episcopalian. In order to go to a Greek church, we had to travel through the snow and everything, and the roads were not the way they are today, to Troy, New York. And we didn't get there as frequently as we would have liked to. But the Episcopal Church was very close, and I grew up there. I became a Sunday school teacher. I started a junior choir. I was very involved. And then after about 10 years, my husband went into the photo finishing business. And we had that for another 10 years, and then we moved to Florida. And I didn't want to stay here at all. I wanted to go back home. And he says, no, we're going to stay here. He says, make up your mind. And I really am glad that he insisted that we stay here. And he was not a very religious person, but I said to him, if we're going to move, we have to find a Greek church. We're getting to be older and we need our own roots. And the motel that we were staying at, the woman said the church just opened up. So she gave me the number and I called, and Father Arthur's wife, Aspasia, answered. She says, please come, please come. That's when my husband decided that he liked it here, because he liked the people. There was what, a handful. And we've been here now for almost 35 years. My son-in-law called us and said that Andrea was in labor, and we jumped in the car and we went up north. And he kept saying, don't come, don't come, don't come. And we jumped in the car and we drove up to New York. And we were there when the baby was born. And when I went into the nursery, she looked at me, and you know how babies are when they're born. She looked and she had a smirk on her face. And that's why I don't like this texting bit. I want to hear their voices, because you can tell what's going on. And they want you to get on the computers, and they want you to text. And I says, I refuse to. I says, I don't want any of that stuff. They brought me a computer twice. I says, take it out of here. I says, I don't want it. Life changes when you lose your mate. It really does. But there's still enough of us that we still manage to get around and do. I'm not a social bug. I don't mind staying home. I used to do a lot of entertaining, a lot of it. I don't do any of it anymore. I can't. I couldn't get the cups on the table. I mean, my hands are trembling. And I just can't do that like I used to. But we manage. And don't forget, family is very, very important. Your friends, you can't do without, but your family is very, very important. We have too much freedom. We have too much of everything. And we have forgotten what the true values of life are. You know, money we need, we have to in order to survive. But greed is not good. And yet, you know, there are times that I watch television and I see young people and there's a flicker of hope. There's some good kids out there. We're coming to an end of this film, and I want you to know I love all of you very, very much. I wish nothing but the best for you. I wish you lots of luck. I love you very much. And don't forget to call once in a while.
My grandfather was born in Budapest, and my father was born in the United States, so I'm a second generation American. My mother's family came from Canada, and she was born in the United States in Worcester, Massachusetts. My parents brought me up during the Depression, and they sometimes had to go without food to feed my sister and myself. And I made a vow that when I grew up, I would never be wanting of anything, or my children would never want for anything. And I think that's what drove me my whole life. But I went away in the Navy when I was 17 years old in World War II. I remember when the Germans invaded Poland, and when Great Britain declared war on the Germans. I remember hearing it on the radio. It was very clear, I never forgot it. After I finished boot camp, I was an able-bodied seaman, but eventually I was moved up to the bridge and became a quartermaster and worked on the bridge. I was very good at steering the ship. In fact, I had a lot of knowledge on the water because we were brought up on lakes in the Adirondacks. And somehow I felt that ship through my hands. And when we got to go through the Panama Canal, the pilot said, "Put the best helmsman you have on the wheel." And I was the one that took the ship through the Panama Canal on the way to the Pacific. We were on a ship leaving Guam in the Pacific, and announced over the speaker system of the ship that the war had ended in Europe, but it still hadn't ended yet with Japan. Then I went to the university, and then I went to the Foreign Service for 20 years. My first post was Vienna. Then I was direct transferred to Moscow in 1955 because I was single at the time, and the embassy didn't have room for a lot of married people. So I went to Moscow in April 1955 and left in 1959. And when under President Eisenhower, when the American government invaded Beirut, they had huge demonstrations in front of the embassy, throw ink bottles at the building. And that night I was going to the Bolshoi Theater with the secretary. We were going to see Swan Lake. And there was a woman sitting next to me, and she said, whispered in my ear, she said, "Don't pay attention to what the Russians don't feel that way about Americans. We remember what you did for us during the war." As a matter of fact, I was coming back by train from Warsaw, and I was sitting in my compartment, and this little girl was running back and forth, and she stopped, and I gave her a chocolate bar. A little while later, she came with her father, and he had her hand, and he said, "Did you give her this chocolate bar?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm working at the American Embassy in Moscow," and he was coming from the Soviet Embassy in East Berlin. And he said, "Do you have any Chesterfield cigarettes?" And I said, "No, but I have another brand, I don't remember what it was." And I said, "Why would you ask for Chesterfields?" He said, well, I was in the Soviet Army. We got these packages from the United States, and that was the cigarettes that were in there, which it seems that they never forgot. I think you have to live and set an example on how you live. If you do things with reason, you have high ethical standards, which I have and my son has, and I didn't tell him about it. He saw my standards, and he's reacted the same way. And I don't think they want to listen to old people anyway, because we don't know anything. We have to know a lot more than they know. But if you set an example in moderation in everything you do, and you have the highest ethical standards, they will learn from it. But you can't tell them what to do. They won't do it. If I had to tell young people how to lead their lives, one, I would tell them never to lie, to be honest, and to have high ethical standards. Young people today, it's very difficult for them to believe in God or go to church. My son tells me, well, God is everywhere, so why do I have to go to church? And I tell him, well, you have to go to church to be near God. He said, well, I'm near him all the time. I said, but when you're in church, you think differently. You're focused on what is going on in church. It's different than, I tell him, I think it's a cop-out that you say God is everywhere. That's taken for granted, but that's no reason not to go to church. And that's what I would tell them. It's very difficult for them to believe in God today because there are no outward signs. They don't really understand faith. You can be happy on earth. And you expect that you're going to be happy, when you die. But happiness is within yourself. What makes you happy? I don't know what makes you happy. I know what makes me happy. I don't dwell on the negative in life. There's a lot of things that cause a lot of stress, but that's part of life. Stress sometimes is good for you. Get you moving, get things done. I think that it would be difficult for me not to go to church every Sunday. Somebody could say, well, you were brought up that way. I'd say yes. But what's wrong with that? If that's part of the satisfaction of my spiritual life, then that's what I have to do. In fact, when I don't go, I feel very guilty about it. It causes stress. It makes me unhappy. If I don't go to church, my Sundays aren't the same.
"1941 was the worst year of my life. You walk in the streets of Athens and you see people dead from starvation. And the worst thing that I saw is dying from starvation, because you saw little kids, they were blowing the faces and they were dying. And that was because of starvation. So Greece was under attack by the communists. They wanted to take the government, something that they didn't do, they weren't able to do. And in 1947, I was drafted in the Greek army until 1950. And I went to the northern part of Greece, and I saw death, and I saw separation of children, because what the communists did at that time, they took to the northern countries 28,000 children to prepare them to be the future leaders of communism to come back into Greece. So all those events created my knowledge about life, the importance of life, the importance of freedom, friendship, as I say. And I was prepared now to go and find out what the rest of the world is. And I was very fortunate to come into this country. I don't say that we are thriskolepti, the Greek word of being over jealous, faithful. It was part of life, it still is, and I guess it has helped us in more than one ways to be together all those 60 years, and not even thinking about a divorce, do we? Never did. But I would like to say about Margaret one thing. Very humble, very faithful, strong in her own ways that doesn't show the strength. And she was able to keep with my character. It was 1952, November of 1952, when I started working for my future father-in-law's restaurant. He hired me at the time, although really I had the feeling that he didn't really need me, the business. I think he did it more, I feel, because of knowing later on as a human being, he felt sorry for me. I don't know why. I was going to school.
You had no job.
Hmm?
You had no job. And you
I had no job at the time, and I was alone. Anyway, I can't go into details. Margaret didn't say much, but she was very efficient. She didn't miss a step. Memory. I could see this, and I say this honestly. I said she's supposed to be a beautiful homemaker. When I met her, she thought that a man, and I found out a man has to smoke. When we went as newlyweds to her village, everybody wanted to meet me and all that. And then I met everybody, but I didn't go out to the taverns. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. And I love to draw. Another time I was under the trees drawing village homes and all that. And the rumor went around that Theo, very likely he has TB. He's sick. I have TB because I don't smoke, I don't drink. That came around. And I said, no. We thank God for all those gifts that you cannot buy with money, or you cannot replace them with anything else. Truly, we're pleased, happy, and thankful to God that we are who we are. No one else like us, and I'm glad for that. I go to the doctors, and one thing that I told him is I don't like medications because pharmakon is in Greek, pharmacy. We have the word pharmacy. If you want to say to somebody, I'm going to poison you, say, θα σε φαρμακώσω. I'll give you pharmakon, poison. I said, pharmakon is poison. So I don't like them. I'll take them only if I'm dying, and otherwise I don't like them. Margaret has a tricycle that in the morning and afternoon will go around. Everybody knows her. And what she will do, she will look around, and if there's a furniture that people throw away, she's going to call me. I go to the truck and I take the furniture and take the pieces and I make the icons. She's a calm person, kind all around. She No, I'm telling you the truth because I'm not going to get any money. I didn't get any prika. Prika is a dowry in Greek. We got only $14,000 and $2,000 for the honeymoon trip, I believe, as a gift. In Greece, you know that when you get married, it's better to have a little something, at least a house that you can live in, because it was not easy. Today maybe it's easier. By the time you had prika. So the girl who had more prika was easier to get married, even if she was ugly. At this point, I would say we've been winners, both of us. I'm doing the talking and she's doing the silencing. But I'm talking for her also, I know that. My father was a person that I never saw him upset, mad. He had a Greek word that was not something that I can say. I was a little bit lambadi, just like a trash, just forget about it. And that was the worst that he said in his life. Never said bad words, never got upset, and we're talking about conditions that they were terrible all around. Mother was a little stronger in her own ways, but this agape was always there. So what we tried as much as possible between the two of us to have that, to work on that, and to convey that into the lives of our children.
Still we feel we didn't do enough.
Still, we do not give enough that. Because the other day she said, I said, isn't it enough? I said, this faucet has to stop sometime. As it is. I look forward to wait for Saturday because I know next day is Sunday. So I'll take off and I'll go there and I'll give the little that I'm able to give with this community, in the beautiful community that we have. And then I will come home and I feel well. I said, oh boy, 7 more days for that. I don't know what the word fortunate means, but if you believe you're fortunate, you do not go to the one who plays the cards and tells you your future to see how fortunate you are. So thank God, I would say. Thank God for everything.
The war started for us in that part of what was then Poland in 1939. And let me get it straight, that we were then experiencing some attacks of German planes on the town of Krzemieniec. But right at that moment, there was a pact made between Hitler's Germany and Stalin's USSR. So they divided Poland. And a part of Poland in which I was growing up ended up being officially Ukraine. They made a kind of a sham voting, plebiscite. Supposedly we voted, and of course 100% everybody agreed to be happy Soviet Russia, Soviet Ukraine. So but officially by early 1940 we were officially Ukraine and Poland was forgotten.
And you became Ukrainian again, right?
Became Ukrainian citizen. And at that point, I was, of course, a member of a Soviet-run school. Because of that, the principal was a commissar of some kind. And I remember him, I vividly remember Mr. Pinchuk telling me, Wallstedt, you're such a good student. Why do you go to church? You know you should come and listen to our party and be convinced to come back to us. I kept my mouth shut because that's how you survived in those days. I could have become a martyr, I guess, and that wasn't it. But anyway, I kept my mouth shut. Some kids did not keep their mouth shut and they did not survive. Those were mostly Polish kids who were transported to Kazakhstan, Lord knows where. They mostly never came back. I had this guy from UNRWA providing sponsorship because he already was in Detroit working in a factory, car factory. And the other fellow was a co-student from medical school, Andrews Gutta, who had a sister in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Sister was married. They had a situation in the church there. His brother-in-law was a cantor of some kind, music director. And that was the reason why I ended up in Pennsylvania as sponsored by these people with just $20 in my pocket in May 1950, and that's where I met Dorothy, because it happened that by that time, just as I finished my medical school, she just finished her nursing school. It was difficult to find a job in the hospital, but eventually, by going around asking a lot of questions, I found this hospital in Pottstown, not far from where my friend was living, where they could use me as some kind of a junior intern. It was not very official, I had no license, but they accepted me, and for 6 months I worked there, and during those 6 months, in September of 1950, she graduated as an RN, as a nurse. And the funny story goes with that, my English was still kind of poor at that time, and I was really interested in her, sort of dating her a little bit, and I was trying to give her a nice card to congratulate for graduation. And so I chose a card that said on it, sympathy. Because in European languages that I knew, sympatia was romantic interest. You may know that.
Right, sympatia, my sympatia.
So she gets that card to this day, says, what was he trying to do to me to give me a sympathy card because I graduated? I had to go to Illinois. I left for Peoria, had my internship, and I corresponded with her. So by September of 1951, I had planned a nice vacation on a beautiful spot on Lake Erie. I don't know if you know it. It's called Put-in-Bay Island. It's it's a fairly large island, not far from Clinton, Ohio, not far from Toledo, Ohio. And so I invited her to come along with me, and she agreed. And to this day, tell people, believe it or not, we slept in separate bedrooms. So one of the social workers says, well, maybe that's why your marriage has lasted for 61 years. Looking back, the happiest time was, of course, when children were growing up. That, without question, at that time, I maybe did not think of it in these terms. I just kept busy raising them and enjoying the little vacations together, whatever, the activities we had together. But right now, looking back, that's one of the most pleasant memories, probably for you too, I guess. She wrote a lot of things in my diary, which I still have here with me. In those days, we used to keep little diaries where kids would sign a little something and sign their name. I used to get to grade school, and the mother would write me that stuff time and again. Some kind of wise pearls of wisdom. Of course, it goes back to the family again. Young kids learn by looking around, watching, and the kid, as he grows up, he can see his parents taking care of themselves, or of him, or of others. And it's constant watching observation. I remember the old Ukrainian fable. I was just a little kid this talking. They were telling me a fable of how a little kid like that was making a little bowl out of clay. And so they asked him, why do you do this, make this bowl? And he said, well, that's so I can, when you grow old, I can make it for you to feed you where you feed Grandpa over there in the corner. Grandpa was sitting in the corner forgotten, you know. And religion is, of course, great because religion promises you that benefit not just here, but in hereafter, which is a separate issue by itself. Becomes important when you get into hospice or when you're told you have only 6 months to live, that kind of stuff. You have to have something outside of yourself that you're willing to live for.
Hi, my name is Vasilios Dabelis. In English, Vasilios is Bill. I'm here today talking to my friend Yuri I met in church. He's a Russian, goes to our church, and we got together and we're talking about this. I was born in Lowell, Massachusetts, 1925, actually 24, but we leave it at 25. They made a mistake. When the war started, my brother went in and I was anxious to go in, and I joined the service, the Army in Massachusetts, and I went all over the country and we were learning to become good soldiers, and fortunately I was in good service by landing in Camp Shelby, Mississippi, where we trained with the 442nd Army Division, and the 442nd Army Division were the American Japanese soldiers, some of the best soldiers we ever had. And from there we went to Camp Kilman, New Jersey, and from there we shipped out to go overseas. Just about the time the Battle of the Bulge started, and they needed as many soldiers as could. We were soldiers, but I was an engineer soldier. I was assigned to the 1155th Combat Engineers. There were 11 officers and 55 men. We were trained in America. We went overseas and we landed in Le Havre, crossed in barges, and went right into the Battle of the Bulge in Liège, during the worst time at all. That's when they had trouble. We had no ammunition, no food. We were surrounded, and the German general told our General McAuliffe to give up, and he gave a message back to them, nuts, he wouldn't give up. General Patton was volunteered to come to Belgium and help us, and he ran out of gas too, because he didn't have gas or ammo, and his men were slaughtered also. Consequently, from there we left. We went into Remagen. We captured the Remagen Bridge by accident. The generals told our major to capture the city of Remagen and continue south, but they found the bridge intact. They said, the heck with orders, we're going to cross the bridge at Remagen. March the 7th, 45. From there we went across. I crossed it March the 10th with my group, and then the Germans blew it up March the 15th. We continued from there to Cologne, Aachen, Dusseldorf, and towards up to where we met the Russian soldiers in Landorf. We could not go into Berlin because the deal was made with the United States government and England that the Russians were to take Berlin. We were transferred and continued on to Bavaria. We were there May 15th when the war ended. We stayed in a place called Band of Brothers Chateaus, and then the officer Colonel asked us, you boys want to go to the Philippines and help the boys there? And we volunteered, and we went. Consequently, we landed in a bad place, Lingayen Gulf. It was horrible. It's 20 miles from Manila, into Manila, and the war ended. And after the war ended, I took my discharge, stayed there, and went to work with the Army, signed up with the Army Transportation Corps. Well, a friend of mine in Pennsylvania, and he contacted me, we talked, and then we found out the rest of the outfit had died because I was 17, 18, he was like 19. I guess he's 92 now, and consequently there's only a couple of us left. We weren't heroes or anything, but just 2 of us left alive, and I'm one of them. And the rest of the boys, of course, they were 25, 30 at the time. They'd have been 110 now, so of course they've passed away. like I said before, we just did our job as engineers. We were building small bridges, bailing bridges, blowing other bridges, and while the boys were fighting in France, we were already in Belgium, going cuckoo, you know. And that was it. I went to the Philippines, like I said, and here I am now.